What? Hey! What's up, everybody? Welcome. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Honest Youth Pastor Tuesday night live stream. Appreciate you being here tonight. We're going to be talking about social media and its effects on believers. Let's go ahead and hop over to the screen with Matt and Josh.
Hello.
Matt, you are freshly back from the Theo U conference. Did you get a tan? Did you have fun?
I did not. I was moving around too much too quickly to stay in one spot to get a tan, sadly. Plus, what was weird is we were in the desert, and so specifically in the early mornings and at night, it was colder than it is here at home in the Appalachian Mountains. So it's really weird how the desert works like that. It goes from extreme high temperatures, and at night it just plummets.
It's like it's trying to kill you. It's either going to freeze you out or burn you up. It's going to get you one way or the other.
I learned that lesson in Iraq once.
Yeah.
And just once. I woke up in the morning in the spring and it was like 35 degrees. Put a wool sweater on. Under my uniform, under my body armor. We went out on a patrol. And at noon, it was 80 degrees. I couldn't take it off. I was outside the wire, like in some village. And so I just sat and sweat. I got so hot. When you're so hot, like it like stings, like your skin, like it feels like daggers. Felt like that until we got back at like 3 or 4. Then on, I'll just shiver until it warms up.
I would rather not experience that again. Good deal. Yeah. I have none of those stories. Yeah. The closest I have is like an annoyance in the spring when it's cold in the morning and hot in the afternoon, but I just take off my jacket. So I have nothing like that. So,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've never been to the desert. So, guys, tonight, we are going to be talking about social media and its effects, specifically on believers. When I was thinking about tonight's topic, I was like, there's obviously social media is interesting in and of itself, specifically things like Facebook, Twitter, a little bit with the Instagram, but really more Facebook, Twitter, text-based sort of social media. It's very interesting because of how in it we get, right? I mean, how you have no tone. If you're sharing some news story, usually you're totally the headline is what's gonna make it or break it, and that may not be representational of the actual story. And so, like, what I found interesting was I'd be interested to get you guys' take as well. As I observe the landscape of social media, it's just super interesting to see how and I'm having to learn this the hard way, how it's just easier to step back and just watch than engage. Because it's very interesting how things are shared, the reason people share them, the biases behind why they're sharing them. And so we'll talk about that first, but then I really want to use tonight to really talk about sort of how you guys think Christians should best engage in that, right? I mean, we have these devices that who knows how long we're each on them every week. My iPhone every Sunday tells me how long I've been on it, which is sometimes encouraging.
I just ignore that. Whenever I see that notification pop up, I just swipe it away before I can actually read what it says.
I don't know. I don't care. So obviously we're on our phones a lot or a little, depending on who you are. And with that, obviously you have a lot come in, that's affecting you and how you perceive the day and everything. So firstly, have you noticed that on I don't know what platform you guys are on. I mean, obviously you're on Instagram, but I don't know if you're on any of the other ones. Have you seen that for sure? Or am I just crazy?
I just got back on Facebook like 3 months ago. And so it's a different experience for me this time because I have less than 100 friends on there right now. Just people that I actually know and want to know.
That's the important part. Yeah, I want to know you.
Right? Because, I mean, when I deleted it the first time, that was a big thing as I'm scrolling through this list of, I was 500 or 600 people. It's like, I haven't talked to you in 10 years. I haven't talked to you in, forever. We met once. We're not even actually friends, But anyways, it is a different experience going back now. And I kind of hate it, to be honest. Like I'm only on it for marketplace at this point, and to connect with specific individuals. So
Marketplace, I tell you what, solid deals. So I mean, you got to meet people like
marketplace is what's up.
you got to meet some people in like some shady Dollar General parking lots. But I've got half the stuff in this room from Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah,
so.
man. Yeah. There's some stuff I want to sell and get rid of. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on the tone and why people share things. And it can be really interesting having a diverse range of friends on Facebook. Like imagine being friends with Democrats and Republicans this day and age. Having both in your feed. And what's really fun is watching them merge in the comments,
Gotcha. So Matt,
I
what
have a friend who's Serbian and is pro-Putin.
Oh,
That's
wow.
a fun one.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see the engagement there.
Yeah. She's cool. She's a neat person. Her and her husband. Yeah. Different take on things being Serbian, man.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess that would give you a little bit different. So you're just on Facebook? Are you on Twitter or no?
Not really. I have a Twitter account. I don't think I've ever even written a tweet once, and I forget that I have it and never scroll it.
That's smart.
So
okay.
I actually uninstalled it the other day because I was like, I don't even see the point of it on my phone. I don't use it. I've thought about doing it. If I were to do anything with I'm So Baptist, that's where my crowd is. That's where all the boomers are, but I just don't care enough. So maybe one day when I want to be Baptist famous, I'll go do it. But
hey, there you go. Get a trophy. Matt, are you on Twitter? Or I don't think so. You're just on Instagram, right? Or are you?
Yeah. So I'm just on Instagram. I used to be on Facebook, but it was causing too many problems with family members and church members as well. So I actually had to, I deactivated my Facebook for a while. I didn't use it, but then that became complicated because all of our small groups and kids' church volunteer group chats are in Facebook Messenger, so I had to re-download that, like reactivate it, but only have it as Messenger, so I can correspond with my small group, with my Wednesday night teachers, and with my Sunday morning teachers with kids ministries and such. But yeah, I mean, and it was one of those things where, like on Facebook, when I was first in seminary, I was still under the delusion that people actually found things about the Bible and theology to be interesting. And so I wanted to share these things with the world and share these things with my family and my friends, not even in an extremely argumentative way, but I was just sort of like, hey, this is neat, throw this out there. And people just simply would not have it. And I learned my lesson very quickly that they really do not care and would prefer for me just to be quiet because I don't know. It was really weird because you say something and it like ruffles somebody's feathers because people most people honestly either don't appreciate mystery or can't appreciate it because they have not allowed themselves to have space for mystery and the fact that they don't know everything. And so you put something out there that they're uncomfortable with, that they've never heard before, and they just think that you're just insane. And we actually had this. What?
You've been called a heretic a few times, I can tell.
Well, so we say it differently in Pentecostal holiness charismatic circles, and because we don't know what a heretic is, because we all have terrible theology anyways. So we're probably the heretics and don't even know it. And so what we say when we want to insult someone is we tell them that they have lost their anointing.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I've been told that I've lost my anointing. I've had people say that they would never be back to church where I'm on staff because I have been educated and I have learned about God, and that's not something you're supposed to do. So,
wow. Okay, so now I know if I ever get told by a Pentecostal that I've lost my anointing, I at least know what that means, because I would have been totally lost before tonight. I didn't know that. Cool. Okay. So
that's what I told one of them one time. I was like, well, if I lost it, I guess that means I never had it to begin with. So.
Oh. So, all right. So
I've not lost anything.
So I think just from that just from the short intro there, I think it sort of answers the sort of the second thing I was going to say before we got into the effects on people and how to deal with that. Is I think there's this real, I mean, and we're all adults here, obviously. So even with that, the effects on us, even as adults, is like, man, this is annoying. This is problematic. Like, it just runs, like, it just makes me mad because somebody said that. And so with that, I was thinking about it because, I mean, I got kids. And I was thinking about that, not just today, but probably the last, like, kind of month. Some of the stuff that we've gotten through the various social medias for the Honest Youth Pastor. And I'm like, man, if a kid got inundated with this and didn't know how to process it, it would be terrible for them. Like, it would just wreck you. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight was going into that. How do we then, as Christians, deal with, if we're going to be on social media platforms, which clearly there's a lot of Christians that are, how do we then best deal with those interactions that we do have, right? So people, for example, telling you that you don't have the anointing anymore, or obviously the political thing that you mentioned, Josh, or this back and forth, is that there's a few ways to engage that I think are interesting that I have some thoughts on, but I'd like to kind of pick your guys' brains in regards to, like, if somebody's like, hey man, this is just like, I mean, you've seen my feed, right? Like, how would you deal with it, right? So what advice would you give somebody that obviously is dealing with that? Because I think with the political climate, all of the social events happening, there's a lot of people that just, I don't think we've really trained ourselves on how to handle it well. We just sort of react sometimes. So, like, what advice would you give somebody? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, I mean, we get messages every so often of people just being like, hey, I don't know how you deal with this, that, or the other thing. And I give them some advice. But if that was you, like, what would you tell a Christian that's like, man, this is just like, my whole day was ruined. I don't know what to think. I don't even want to be here anymore. What would your advice be?
My perspective is a little different going back to Facebook now. So I deleted it just because it had gotten so toxic. And I was toxic as well. Like, I had gotten sucked into it. And I realized that everything I was posting was always did have a tone to it. I made it obvious what that tone was. Like, I was disapproving of something. I would very rarely post, hey, this is me and my kids, something joyful or whatever. So I just deleted it and got out of it. Going back to it now, I see other people that are like that. And I've unfollowed them at this point. They're good friends of mine, but they don't have anything good to say. It's really, really negative. And they're both believers. But I don't care. And I think there needs to be a part. There needs to be a part of us that just doesn't care about that, because neither one of them is in my daily life. They both live almost literally 1,000 miles away. So why should they have that much say and input over my daily day-to-day, right? Instead, I should be focused on people in my immediate sphere of influence that I can actually communicate with and dialogue with in person if need, right? Because most of my Facebook friends now, aside from like family that's far away or like really old friends that are far away, most of them are all local to me. And if there were to be some sort of disagreement or some sort of an issue, we could be like, hey, you know what? Let's get together on Saturday. We'll grab breakfast. We'll talk it out. And that's real human interaction at that point. And that can lead to that. But those guys, it's not going to happen because they're so far away. And they're so entrenched in their worldview and in their theology that they're not going to change. And so you're going to always be at that conflict if there's not mutual respect. And there's not mutual respect either. So I think for my advice would be to not care too much about it, because they don't define who you are. Like, you hold that loosely. And if people are continually negatives, cut it out. Like, they don't need to have a platform in your life to be negative.
Yeah. No, I think that's good advice, especially with like what you were talking about is like, you don't actually see them every day. There's not I think there's this thing, and I'm sure it'll come up again, but there's this thing with social media that, and I had to learn this probably within the first 4-5 years of doing the page, is that you cannot take this personally. There's some rando on the other side of the screen.
Right.
Like, you're never going to see them. They're never going to see you. And they are just typing away furiously because you've touched a nerve for whatever reason. But at that point, it's just a matter of being like not engaging. Or like you said, I think it gets to the point where sometimes, especially if somebody's like really coming at you, you have to like unfriend or block or whatever, so that doesn't, again, because I think there's some people, and Matt might bring this up, I know I will when I get, start unpacking this a bit more, but like there's a point where we don't want to do that sometimes, but like what you said, like, dude, you're 500 miles away. I'm not going to see you. It's not this important. When I see your name on my feed, it annoys me. So I'm going to get rid of the name on the feed. So yeah, I think that's a great point you made there, Josh. Matt, what did you do, buddy? Do you befriend everyone? Do you send them flowers? Do you invite them to your conferences?
No, the last time I sent someone flowers, they got like an EPA out on me, so I don't send flowers anymore.
Well, hold on, time out.
I'm just kidding.
What is an EPA? What is that?
Well, that's like one of those like those legal agreements where you can't come within so many
like a restraining order
of the person or whatever.
Restraining order. Gotcha.
Yeah, like a restraining order. Yeah, like a restraining order. But I'm just kidding. I don't have any restraining orders.
Good to know.
What?
Currently?
Yeah, not within the last 7 years.
Forever? Yeah.
or ever. So I think it's both a good and a bad aspect of social media in the way that we can pick and choose who is in our spheres of influence. I tell my kids, and this is more applicable to real life, you could say, but although at the same time, I mean, the internet online interactions are just as much, real life to an extent. They just don't have as much bearing on us. But anyways, to my kids, I always tell them that you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your friend's nose. So there's that. But on the internet, we sort of we can do that, and so we can cut people out. We can unfollow them. We can block them. And now, even thankfully on Instagram, we can also choose to block any other accounts that is connected to that one sign-in profile or whatever, which is, which could be really useful. But at the same time, that can also take away from our problem-solving abilities, because we can cause as much havoc as we want, and we can also leave as much havoc unresolved as we want, which is also something that is a little bit daunting in the fact that Jesus says that we will be evaluated by every, it's the word idle, but it's like unproductive word that we speak. So, people, sometimes if it doesn't have to translate, if we think, we'll be, judged by every idle word we speak, and, yes, in the atonement, our sins are atoned for, but it's more the idea that we are evaluated by the unproductive things that we say and we do. And so in that sense, if we as Christians, even if none of our peers, none of our church members, none of our family, none of our friends know the kind of attitude that we are having towards people in random comment sections on the internet, in direct message involvement, in live videos like this, there may not be that much of like an immediate social restraint, but we will have to give an account for that as Christians, even for things. Now, and I'm specifically talking about things that maybe are not sin, but are just not things that are becoming of someone who is professing the name of Christ, such as treating someone rudely or pridefully or dismissing without a proper basis for dismissing them and treating them in a certain way, because we can say something to a person on the internet and like never have that same interaction again. But I think that also applies to real life too, because I have been with professing Christians, even pastors, preachers, etc., and you will be out in public with them, whether it be someone walking down the road, whether it be someone driving in the car next to them, or just a total random stranger in whatever context it may be. And I'm going to say we, because I don't want to put the focus all on other people, because I've probably had the same issue, but we go into this very selfish, self-preserving mentality, and any kind of inconvenience upon us will cause us to lash out at someone. And I think it's unconsciously because I don't have to give an account for what I'm doing to this person because I have no interrelational connections to them. So I can harass the old lady driving down the road who's in my way and is slowing me down. And I can, chew the waitress out for getting the order wrong, even though, of course, it was just the cook in the back who read the ticket incorrectly, and the waitress is just trying to make money to support her family or whatever it is. And so I think that these issues are not only based in our online presence, but I think that they are exacerbated, that they are amplified on the
Yeah,
internet
that's right.
because that kind of disconnectivity of very brief interaction allows us to really just, pull down our pants and show our hiney and not have to really give an account for that in the moment. But at the same time, there is coming a day that I believe that even as born again, forgiven Christians, that we will give an evaluation for the good that we did and the unprofitable and idle things that we did, and the time and the talents and the ability efforts that we wasted in negative application. I'm not someone who's saying, if you sit down to play a board game with your family or watch a movie or something like that, you're wasting time and it's a sin, you're gonna have to give an account. But I'm more so talking about it like an abuse that doesn't necessarily fall into a sin category.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because that was something that I forget. A week or so ago, I was talking to somebody about that. How basically what you see online is the how someone is just without anybody watching, because you're just behind. I mean, you're behind a keyboard, so it's not like even. I mean,
Right.
and I don't see a whole lot of difference, honestly, between anonymous accounts and accounts with people with real names. Basically, it's the same. I mean, the anonymous accounts can be quite a bit more vulgar, but I think that comes along with why they probably have an anonymous account in the first place. But so with that, so just moving along with the conversation, we've all been on social media. I think everybody can basically relate to that. Everyone sees the stresses of it and then the effects of it as far as how to handle people that are coming at you, right? And saying things, or even you're like what you mentioned, Matt, you going, to people's comment sections or you replying to other people also it's a direct connection to that as well. And I think like the really important thing you mentioned that I think we all forget is the fact that no matter if it's said online or if it's said face to face, there's this account you have to give, or you were going to give eventually, of all of that in the first place. And we don't really think about that too much. And if we did, I think we'd type a lot slower and be a lot more careful, perhaps, with the things that we said and did, just with that knowledge. So there, I'm trying to think of how to pivot into this next section, right? So we've talked about, how to deal with that, but what effects have you seen maybe in your own life or on other believers around you in regards to this social media, right? As far as interactions online, whether it be like, so for example, I'll just give an example. What I find interesting is how people react to or interact with certain things in such a way that there's not a lot of self-control attached to it. So when we did a while back, when we did that whole chosen thing, like that was very intriguing. If you go through that comment section, what that looks like, right? And I think and I'm just transparent. I'm just as guilty. Like I have to really think about what I'm saying before I react to something anymore. And so like what, I guess in regards to discipline and, self-control, what do you think Christians are doing well in this area of social media and self-control? And what areas do you think that you've seen, maybe yourself or others, that like, oh, we could do a whole lot better? Like I've caught myself at least 4 times today thinking about this because I've had to be like, okay, I didn't do that very well, or I should have said this in a different way. And just in prep for tonight, because I knew what we were going to talk about. And so with that in the forefront of my mind, I was like, man, like I'm going to talk about this tonight. And I just said this online. And so it's one of those things that I don't think we're real conscious of, but how do you think, discipline and self-control play into that? Because I mean, we're told to have self-control and discipline. So how do you think we do that well or very poorly as Christians? I mean, how have you seen that play out in your life and others' lives that you know?
I feel like I've seen on the good side, I see believers do well, putting out prayer requests, comforting other people, and encouraging them as events happen in your life that are tragic or terrible. It could be big national scale stuff. It could be not national scale, big deal if somebody's child is sick or dies, right? Not necessarily national news, but more local. I feel like that's a really good place for believers to gather around and put some news out there about what's happening with their family. And it lets others know. And at that point, it's an actual functioning communication. This is what's going on with our family. Grandma's sick. She's in the ER. And now you have a place to provide updates. A good example is my nephew. He was born with a heart defect. So we made a page for him. And just put it out there and it grew. Got thousands of followers. And all of these people just kind of poured love on my sister and my brother-in-law and prayed for my nephew. And that was just kind of a neat thing. Like that was a good use of social media to kind of detail that journey and put all those photos of Landon on there. And here's where he's at, and here's how he's progressing. And that turned out to be a really neat little community around my nephew. And I think that's where Christians really can shine and can do good things. I think the bad part is when I think the bad is kind of like Matt said, it's amplified with what and who we already are. So our biases, anything that we think that we know for certain and aren't willing to think through or through again or continue to wrestle with, we just go out like a hammer and we're just looking for nails, and we just want to hammer people on anything that disagrees with us at that point, right? And you'll see that on Christian pages everywhere. Someone puts out some sort of theological statement, doesn't matter what it is or where it ends on the spectrum, there are people with hammers in hand from the rest of the spectrum that are going to come set you straight. And it can turn pretty belligerent pretty quickly because there's no tone, like you said, Mike, right? Like you can't hear or see how someone is communicating if you don't know them directly. Like if you or Matt were to post something snarky on my page, I would laugh because I know who you are.
Yeah,
and there's rapport, there's history.
I think some random
commenter
is like you. So I was having this conversation today with somebody. I think people we're all guilty of this in some extent, of building caricatures of the person on the other side. So they say something, we read it, and then we just assume you are that caricature of this person I once interacted with that is literally the worst possible version of who you could be. And you're probably not that, but because that's how I'm reading into that, I'm not giving you any benefit of a doubt, and that's just who you are, and that's just going to and that sets the whole tone for the conversation. You can't have a good conversation that way. But anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, that's right. No, I mean, I think that's kind of the good and the bad. I think the bad too is the amount of information that people are consuming on a daily basis, and most of it's not good information. So I think a part of that discipline and self-control has to be understanding what good sources of information are and how to evaluate what's being said. And it's probably good to do that before you engage. And if it's not good information, is it worth engaging? Is it even worth dealing with? Or do you just go to the next post and see what else is going on in the world? And I think that's a big key, is kind of picking those battles, so to speak. You don't have to engage with everything. And if it's absolutely preposterous what's being said, why bother? You know, like
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's where a lot of like, so with teens, especially, I think with students, there is this, so you have this well of just wave of information coming at people in which they have an opinion on all of it, and then you get to the end of the day and you'll talk to some of these kids and they're exhausted mentally because they've literally been
that's right.
interacting with random content
Yeah.
all day that really doesn't affect their life immediately, but they felt like they had to interact with it, and now they're so
Right.
zapped that they can't function. And like you said, most of that information was negative, so now not only are they emotionally drained, they're pretty depressed at the end of the day because all you've had is an enormous wave of negativity that you felt like you had to respond to, and now you're too exhausted mentally to even figure out that like that wasn't the biggest deal that you could have dealt with that day. Like there's a saying apparently called "go touch grass." I've just learned of this, which just means get off the internet. Like I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently that's a thing that, you know, I'm too old to know these things apparently, but that's what kids tell me, that go touch grass means go outside. And so it's just this thing where it's like you're online so much and you have so much negativity that that's all you think about. And then you have I'm not trying to say this is the whole reason for this, but you have high rates of depression and anxiety from people because that's all they've consumed. They don't have anything good coming at them. But anyway, Matt,
Yeah. So I was trying to listen, but then also I had the horror to realize that my Bible app had somehow switched back to light mode, and so it was literally burning my skin while I was trying to find a scripture. Everyone can stay calm. I got it back onto dark mode now, so like you can actually look at it without going completely blind. I don't know how
I actually noticed it
ever
while he was talking. I saw your screen like light up. Like I noticed it.
I thought like those memes.
I thought the Lord put you in the cleft of the rock. I thought the Lord put you in the cleft of the rock, and he went. Yeah, he walked by.
So this conversation brought to mind 2 Corinthians 10 when Paul is dealing with the arguments over his apostleship, and so he's quoting the argument that is against him. Because he says, chapter 10, verse 9, I do not want to appear to be frightening you with my letters, for they say, these hyper apostolone, these he calls them hyper apostles or super apostles, because they got all the gifts and are flashy and know all the right things to say, and they've come along and discounted Paul, and so they say his letters have weight, or his letters are weighty and strong, but his bodily presence is weak, and his in-person speech is of no account. But then, he goes on to defend himself, let such a person understand that what I say by letter when absent, I also want to say when present. So I think that there is something that cannot be avoided in non-face-to-face interpersonal relationships, because this is something that even Paul himself in his epistles is wrestling with, because it was a source of criticism. People were seeing the tone of Paul's epistles as being negative and proof that he was not a proper apostle. And Paul is here having to give an account of himself. And we're a little bit biased because we're reading scripture and not necessarily thinking like how these first century Jews are going to be receiving these things. So we've kind of grown up with it. So I think that sometimes in our online interactions, even though a minute ago I talked about it in a negative light, I think that one of the dangers is that, just as Josh pointed out a moment ago, we may mean something in one way, but there's also the danger of someone else taking it incorrectly. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It cuts going in and going out in the bad way. And so that is another reason to watch ourselves. So we have to watch ourselves on one hand by asking ourselves, is my motivation, my demeanor, my personality being controlled? in what's motivating me to say these things. But then at the same time, even if we have all of the good intention in the world, we also have to be on guard that what we're saying does not have the inherent or obvious value of being twisted in the wrong way. And so there's two extremes, but then we also have to understand that even if we have the right motivations, and even if we're saying it in the right way, which I would contend that Paul the Apostle checks both of those boxes, that people are still going to twist it and distort it. And that of course happens in person engagement as well, but you have the tone of voice, you have body language, you have all of those things. So it's all around something that we have to be on guard and just accept the fact that if we are going to engage, not just in online spaces, but even in the first century, if it was a danger for letters, then of course it's going to be a danger for the internet. And the fact that we may be doing everything right, but some people may just be taking things wrong. And you have to look at it from the other side. If you see something that sets you off, stop and think. Like, what if this person is me? What if their motivations in doing this really is right? Maybe they just didn't present it the right way. Or maybe you see something that you really agree with, looks nice on the outside, but you also have to be careful and say, this may look good on the surface, but what are their actual motivations? And then the third aspect, that we may see something that angers us, need to temper ourselves and wonder, like, does this person actually have good motivations? And so I think that if we can get to a place where we're consciously evaluating those three stipulations and kind of run it through those barriers and drain it a bit, I think that our reactions and our words will be a lot better, because it's ultimately what we are going to give an account for, as what we've done and what we've said. So, was there a second part of the question?
No, I think that's good. I think so. Moving into sort of the last section of the hour here, because I think what you were saying there, basically, I mean, maybe I just so that I don't misread you, could what you were being said basically be summed up as discernment, essentially, in regards to not only what we're saying but what we're hearing. Yeah. So as believers,
I was also going to provide some. Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say something. One of the ministers that spoke at the conference last week said that when he would engage with people in emails, and he's an older minister, so I could tell this was probably a story from like 15 years ago, when most online interaction was purely on email. Because even though email is very, very prevalent even to this day, like, you've also got text messaging and social media. Right. So it's kind of like those extra layers to where it's not all sent through email. But at that time, he was probably going back and forth with people a lot in emails. And so what he would do is he would write an email and would not send it until he had his secretary read it. And that goes for many different ways, like even just seeing if the information that he had presented was valid, but it was also a way to keep himself checked, so that if he was being harsh or if he was misunderstanding the other person, that he had another set of eyes on what he was sending out. And so, like, not all of us have the benefit of having a secretary, of course, but I guess that's why we also have to be a little bit more so on our guard and intentional.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, well, and a lot of that is, I mean, really, so we don't all have secretaries, but we all do have Christian friends, or hopefully the body of believers around us that are going to help us, that could help us in that regard too, right? So I think what it comes down to, what I'm hearing you say, what I would like to like kind of finish this last part of the live up with, is really this dual discernment, but really, like I think the word you used was tempering, the self-control of saying, look, I want to react immediately, But to do it wisely, I probably need to think through this, and I probably need to get the advice of people, which, one, just doing those two things is going to cut down on like your repost, your retweet, or your reaction really, really fast. Like you're not going to do those things so much if you have to actually think about like, oh, if I pass this by somebody, what would they say about it? So I think that in and of itself, I think is a little helpful. Something, honestly, I mean, just like, man, the last probably year or so, like I've really had to think about it a little bit more. So like on the post, for example, the whole reason under all the posts it says read description is so that hopefully I can be as clear as I can be, because that was something we didn't have before. It was just assumption, left up for assumption. And I think even now, so much more, when we live in a world that we are, everything can set somebody off, and it's really, really tempting. I think this isn't something I have to fight so much anymore, but I've seen it in other pages. I've definitely seen it in the past with Honest Youth Pastor. I don't know if you guys have ever fought this with your pages, but like, what will grow something. Like, oh, I could post this, or I could react to this, and that's going to get a whole, I mean, there's whole pages I know. There's a YouTube page that I know that has grown like 10,000 from just reacting to a couple different people, but doing it in such an extreme way that it's like they always go after every word this person says. And it's not, again, like you said, Matt, it's not necessarily that what they're going after is wrong, but it's always like just, I think what you said earlier, Josh, just hammer, 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 hammer. Like, yes, it'll get people there. It will catch them. There's a page that I'm thinking of right now online that like, it's just constant, like, we have to care about this. We've got to do this. If if you're not on the emotionally driven hate train on this, then you're just not thinking right. You're on the wrong side of history. And it's just kind of like, I think if we step back a bit on all different mentalities, not all of, but a part of the division that we see might cool off a bit, because we're not always going after somebody like reactionary wise. Like we're not going to talk about it a lot, but I'm just so sick of seeing so many retweets and comments about certain events that have happened within the last 2 days that it's just kind of like, guys, if you just chill a second, just 1 second, and actually think through what you're saying, I think it would be helpful. That includes me. Like, I'm not excluding myself from that. And so I think like what you were saying, Matt, this whole discernment thing and that whole, really tempering and thinking about what you're saying beforehand is helpful. Why do you think, and we'll kind of tie it up with this, why do you think we're not seeing that so much? Because obviously, I mean, if as Christians, we know that we're supposed to, one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. One of the things we're supposed to do is, one of Paul's things to Titus is older men should teach younger men self-control. Like, that's the thing. So why do you think, like, we know this is a thing that's supposed to happen, but obviously within our current environment and the tools that we have, we're not good at utilizing those tools? Why do you think that is, and what could we do, in your opinion, to get better at it? Because clearly, I think we've established within this time we're not great at it. So why do you think we're not good at it, and how can we get better at it?
I think it's a lack of actual authentic accountability, and I don't know how to resolve that. And I'm talking about practical accountability, because if you are face to face with another man and you say something so degrading and insultive to him that it incites his anger, there's a very good chance you're going to get socked in the nose. Like, you know what I mean? Like an uppercut coming out of nowhere. And so on one hand, there is a little bit of that fear. Let's just say if you're in a crowd of people and there's a man who starts yelling at a woman and berating someone, or a younger person that can't really defend themselves, most likely that, or at least I would hope, that crowd is going to stand up and protect the other person and physically restrain this guy and or other woman, or whatever it may be. And so there's like that practical level of cause and effect takes place. If you are in the workplace and you begin causing ruckus, your job is on the line. If you are around family members will say, your relationships with your family, your friends are on the line. And so intuitively that this is going to have immediate consequences. And so to avoid the consequences, you also try to avoid the act generally.
So peer pressure is good.
Whereas yeah, like a good kind of peer pressure. But it's hard to resolve that on the internet and any other form. I think that it's something that goes all the way from letters to phone calls to emails to social media connectivity, and it's ultimately on the individual and the way that they are working out and exercising their own salvation and their sanctification and their care and their just their desire to present themselves in a certain way. It's just got to be on a case-by-case basis where we as individuals have to make the decision that I'm not going to be like that. And I think maybe that takes a certain amount of self-awareness and conversations like these. I know the left or the liberal progressive side is always like, conversations and stories and things like that. So that term gets used a little bit, but there is a certain amount of self-consciousness and self-awareness that is brought about by bringing these conversations to the table and stepping back and even just thinking right now in this conversation, like, how do the three of us need to carry ourselves and handle our conversations in future lives so that we can apply the benefits of the conversation that we're having right now going forward through our online presence.
Yeah, good deal. That's good. Josh, what do you got to add? I mean, as far as like, obviously we're not good at it. Clearly, how do we do better?
So I think, when you said what tonight's topic was going to be, I immediately pulled up Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. The premise of his book is essentially that with the birth of the telegram through today, the world has shrunk and we have been inundated with information, and that has been detrimental to us just as a species entirely. So I was reading the foreword, and if it's cool with you, I've got like a paragraph and a half I was going to read for you.
Go
I
for
think
it.
it's really
Sure.
pertinent to what we're saying. So he's comparing George Orwell's 1984 to Huxley's Brave New World. So Postman picks up and he says, what Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared that the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Orwell feared that we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared that we would become a trivial culture. In 1984, people were controlled by inflicting pain, and in the Brave New World, they are controlled by inflict pleasure. In short, Orwell feared that what we hate will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we love will ruin us. So that sounds like the internet today.
Yeah.
Like, spot on.
Sure, yeah.
Like,
Huxley seems like he was more dead on, yeah.
Yeah, and when you start talking about being drowned in a sea of irrelevance, right? How come people have a hard time reading their Bibles, but they can tell you the ins and outs of what's going on in Ukraine right now? They know whether or not Trump's been arrested. They probably have some insider detail on what's going on in Nashville right now, right? And what does any of that have? None of that has any direct bearing on their life, really. Like none. Like at all. You know what I'm saying? And that's that irrelevance. We are drowning in a sea of irrelevance because we're worried about those things that are tragic and terrible, but have absolutely zero bearing on us. When really we were to dig into our communities and our churches and have that kind of detailed information about the people that we love, the people that we're in community with, maybe we'd start to change our communities.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's, I think that's the big issue, is that there is so much online and there's so much available to us that we're losing it. We're getting lost in the sauce. I think that trivialness, egoism, the sea of irrelevance, and being killed with pleasure, I think that's all spot on.
Yeah, no, I know I've had that conversation with a few people about, hey, like how much, well, and I know Matt said he just swipes it off at the, on Sundays, but like all that amount of time it shows you.
Yes, yeah.
And saying like, I mean, no joke, just because of the amount of time I spend on Instagram and getting stuff ready. And so it's like 6 hours a week on my phone, just on my phone. And that's not anything else I do on YouTube. That's just what my phone's tracking. And so it's you get to thinking about the reality, like, man, what else could I have done with that 6 hours that would have been far more productive than arguing with somebody, or having even the productive conversations are good to a point, but where do they really go? Like, what's the real, like, I could have had that same conversation with somebody in my real life and actually developed a much better, framework for a relationship than some random person online. And so that's really got me thinking, like, obviously, I mean, this thought wasn't just a thought I thought of this morning, but like, so the last week and a half, 2 weeks, thinking like, how can me as an individual, but also just Honest Youth Pastor as a page, and I mean, obviously we can all, contextualize this, but do a better job of being like, hey, here's an idea. Now get off your phone. Like, go do something else. Like, use this in a profitable way, not in a soul-sucking, I'm looking at my screen forever way. Because that's how the algorithm is built to keep you on there for as long as possible, so you'll stay there and never leave the app. And so it knows what enrages you and it knows what makes you happy, but it doesn't really care what makes you happy, because happiness isn't going to keep you there. Enraging is definitely going to keep you there. So if it can keep you in the cycle, then that's what it really wants to do. And I think if we realize that, getting back to like the whole premise of the video, is, social media and how it affects us as believers, like realizing, like what you just, I think that quote was great. It just realizing, like, you have so much information and it's detrimental to you to have that much information, because most of it, like you said, if it wasn't for your phone, you wouldn't have even known some of those events happen. What does Trump getting arrested or not arrested have to do with me right now? Literally nothing. Nothing. It affects my life none. Right? The whole thing in Nashville, like you said, as tragic as it is, and as all the integral details we could get into it, if it wasn't for my phone, I wouldn't even have known it would have occurred. Now, obviously, that doesn't make it irrelevant or unimportant, but as far as my focus and what I need to be doing, there are obviously things that can draw you away, right? The Ukraine thing, again, also, Ukraine, Russia, not unimportant. But if you're so focused on it, you're neglecting the things you're supposed to be doing. It is problematic. So I think, like, that's great. I think it's a great way to end tonight, is understanding, like, how do you balance these things? And like Matt said earlier, like, the fact that you're going to be held accountable for what you say. So maybe, and this is to me more than it is to everybody else, think about what you do first. Think about, like, is this actually what I want to spend my time on? And is it actually going to be beneficial long-term in our lives? And I think we really need to think about that in various degrees. Obviously, as far as the platforms you're on, there's people, there are people my parents' age that'll be on Facebook like all day arguing with somebody about something. Whereas somebody on, maybe my daughter's age will be on TikTok all day making replies back and forth. And again, equally wasting your time. And so, so hopefully that's helpful there. Anybody got anything to end with before we kind of say la vie tonight?
I don't.
No, Dietrich doesn't have anything to say there, Matt? No, or Bonhoeffer?
Yeah. Nicht.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thanks for being on, guys. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you found this helpful. If you did, as always, like, subscribe, comment, all the cool things. There was one comment I do want to cover real quick. It said, we didn't get to it, but it basically sums up everything we said. Social media is terrible for the new convert, and they can testify to that statement. And I think that really just goes into everything we've already said. It's very easy to get wrapped up in stuff as a new convert that's not important. Oh, Matt does have something.
I actually do have something to end with. If my pastor were on the live right now, he would have an extremely simple, straightforward answer.
Okay, we're going to end with that.
Something that he lobbies for at least on a monthly basis is the fact that he believes that no one should use or have social media. He has no social media accounts or anything like that, but I mean, his wife and his kids, and they all use it, and like everybody else on staff does. But he lobbies all the time. He just says it's a simple, straightforward answer solution. Delete it, be done with it, deactivate it, crown, never look back, and keep going. Which is ironic that we're on a platform that is based out of a social media account. So I'm not to that extent, of course. I think it is the fact that it's here to stay. If that is something that is a personal conviction of a particular person, and that's what works best for them, by all means, they should follow through with that and be faithful and consistent and how they want to apply those kinds of principles. But Jesus did say that it is better for you to pluck out your eye or to cut off your right hand and to cast it away from you than for your whole body to be cast into the flame. And I actually personally think that Jesus meant that in a much more practical way than just in a salvific way, because you'll hear people create terrible theologies out of that and like say, oh, well, if you do this and you die, then God's going to judge you and send you to hell and blah, blah, blah. But I think Jesus meant in a more holistic way that it is better to cut something off and avoid the practical consequences that come from that than to just go through with it and face the full brunt of it. In another way, this is something that my grandpa has always said, but he's always said that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah. So you think the modern day parable that Jesus, or the modern day example Jesus would use is blend thy cell phone and or be cast into the fire. Nope, that's not.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it could be something like this. I would say, it could be something as if Twitter is something, and I'm not saying this to you, Michael, but I'm just saying this just
no. You're a prophet. Twitter, you have the anointing, as some people we know would say. You got the anointing.
I'm operating in the prophetic office tonight. Okay, so if Twitter is something that irks your ire and causes you to lose your self-control and temper and to spout this out, then it would be better to deactivate your Twitter account than to stay on there and let yourself get upset with it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that, and it can even be smaller if there is an account that you follow. Like Josh was saying earlier about just, sometimes you just got to cut those certain things out of your life and out of your view. If there is an account or a person who is causing any kind of negative reaction from you, then it's probably better to cut that person off and just be done with it in that way with a certain amount of deliberation. Not like saying that we should all have our own personal cancel culture in which anytime somebody makes us mad that we block them and unfollow them. But I think that there is, of course, very practical applications on the micro scale as well as the macro scale from that from the virtue of cutting off your hand rather than letting your whole body be cut. So
yeah, no, for sure. No, that's good. I like it. Guys, hopefully you found that helpful. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. Bye.